All right, mga kababayan, think about this for a second. We're in a country, right, where justice is like the ultimate thing, the biggest deal. What happens when, like a crime that looks like one thing, when you really, break it down,
Yeah.
turns out to be like two separate things, right?
Mhm.
Like in the eyes of the Supreme Court. And how does, um, like their whole take on the intent, right? Like why the person did it and the order of events.
Yeah, yeah.
How does that change how we think about I don't know, like crimes like robbery with homicide, right? Like it has these huge implications.
That's what you.
So today we're going to break down a really interesting Supreme Court case that everyone's talking about. It's one of those cases that really makes you think about the details, the specifics of criminal law, and like how strong does the evidence actually need to be, you know?
It's fascinating because it really gets to the heart of how the Supreme Court approaches these really complex situations, right?
Yeah.
It's not just about what happened, but why it happened and when it happened.
Yeah.
And those are the things that really determine how a crime is labeled and ultimately, what kind of consequences come from it.
So we're really diving into the nitty-gritty today.
Hmm.
The case, it involves Edgardo, Catacutan, y Mortera. He went by a few different names, actually.
Oh,
Batibot, Enzo, and Gerry.
okay.
And he was originally convicted of robbery with homicide, right? So that's the crime that we're starting with.
Okay, I got it.
And the victim in this case was Alexander Tanungo. And this all happened around September 24, 2007 in Quezon City, specifically at Alexander's rented room in PND Apartel.
So we're talking about like a specific location, specific time.
Yes,
That's always important in these cases.
Now, like in many legal cases, the timeline is super important here. So Catacutan, he visited Alexander on that day, and he told the security guard, whose name was Alfredo Ortiz Co. He told him that his name was Gerry, right? So like using one of his aliases.
Oh, okay. Already using an alias.
And the security guard logged his arrival at 6:00 p.m.
Right.
That same logbook actually shows his departure the next day at 6:05 a.m.
Okay.
But here's where it gets tragic. On September 25, 2007, Alexander's classmates, they found him dead in his room. And it wasn't just that. When they looked around his room, several of his things were missing.
Oh, wow.
Like his Philips portable DVD player, a Sony Ericsson Z611 mobile phone,
Oh.
Fossil wristwatch, a Creative ZN Vision M multimedia player. He even had a Sony CyberShot DSCT-1 digital camera that was missing, and some cash. They don't know exactly how much.
So it sounds like robbery was definitely part of what happened here.
Yeah. It points in that direction, definitely.
Yeah.
But this is where it gets even more complicated. There was a classmate of Catacutan's, again, named Mark P. Adelaide.
Okay.
And he actually came forward, right?
Yeah.
He testified that Catacutan had confessed to him
Oh, wow.
about both the killing and the robbery.
During a drinking spree.
Yeah, they were drinking. According to Mark, Catacutan said that he'd been with Alexander, and then they had an argument about payment.
Okay.
Apparently, Catacutan only got 500 pesos, but he had expected 1,000. And it was during that fight that he stabbed Alexander with a kitchen knife. He also told Mark that he took Alexander's stuff and hid the knife in the bathroom drain.
Wow. So that's pretty incriminating testimony right there.
Yeah, it's a big deal for sure.
Someone who knows him, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that carries a lot of weight.
And then, remember the security guard, Mr. Ko? Well, he was able to identify Catacutan from pictures
Oh, really?
as the visitor that day. And an NDI agent, Valiant Regunit, he testified that they actually found a knife.
Where Mark had said it would be.
Yeah, exactly. Right where Mark said it would be.
Wow.
And get this, Alexander's brother, Gerry Ningo, he got text messages from someone calling themselves Enzo.
Right. One of the aliases.
Yeah, exactly. And Enzo was offering to sell a Sony CyberShot camera, which was one of the things stolen from Alexander's room. So, it just adds another layer of connection to Catacutan.
It's like a web of evidence, right? It's all sort of pointing to him.
Yeah. So with all of this, right, the case goes to the lower courts.
Makes sense.
And the Regional Trial Court of Quezon City, Branch 101, they found Catacutan guilty of robbery with homicide.
Okay.
This was in their amended decision, June 29th, 2018. And they sentenced him to reclusion perpetua, which basically means life in prison, no parole.
Right.
They felt that all the elements of robbery with homicide were there, especially because he had the camera, the victim had fatal wounds, and, ultimately he died.
Yeah, it seems pretty straightforward at that point, right?
Right. But then it went to the Court of Appeals,
Of course.
and they came out with their decision on January 26, 2021, and they agreed with the RTC. They said that all the evidence, even if it was circumstantial, was enough to prove his guilt, like beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right.
Things like co-identifying Catacutan and Mark's testimony about the confession.
Especially that confession.
Right.
Yeah.
And they actually saw Mark's testimony as an independently relevant statement. So basically, the fact that Catacutan said those things was evidence in itself, not just what he said, but the fact that he said it.
Right, like the act of confessing.
Exactly. So now we've got both the RTC and the Court of Appeals saying robbery with homicide. And eventually it reaches the Supreme Court, right?
Right, the highest court in the land.
And their decision, it was written by Justice Lazaro Javier.
Okay.
It came out on February 13th, 2023, GR known 260731. And the main question they were looking at was, did Edgardo Catacutan actually commit robbery with homicide, the way it's defined in Article 294, Paragraph 1 of the Revised Penal Code? Like, is that the right charge?
Okay, so they're really scrutinizing the specifics of the law here.
Exactly.
To see if it truly applies.
And this is where it gets interesting. The Supreme Court, they disagreed with the lower courts.
Oh, okay.
They said, yes, Mark's testimony about the confession, that was okay to use as evidence. They called it an admission against interest, meaning like Catacutan was admitting to things that would hurt him legally.
Make it more likely to be true.
Right. But they said the prosecution didn't actually prove that Catacutan's original plan was to rob Alexander.
That's a huge distinction.
It's huge, yeah.
Because the whole idea of robbery with homicide is that the intent to rob is there from the beginning.
That's what they focused on. They looked at the order of events based on Catacutan's own confession, right?
Right.
And they said it seemed like the killing happened because of the argument about the money, like the robbery, taking his stuff. That seemed to happen after Alexander was already dead. It was more like an afterthought, not the main reason he went there.
Right. Almost a crime of opportunity.
Yeah.
Rather than a premeditated plan.
Yeah. And there's this really important legal principle here in the Philippines. The Supreme Court, they referred to past cases. Precedents, yeah. And they said, for robbery with homicide, the intent to rob has to come before the killing or at the same time. If you only decide to rob someone after they're already dead, it's not robbery with homicide anymore.
It becomes two separate crimes then.
Exactly. It's not that one combined thing anymore. So because of that, the Supreme Court said no to robbery with homicide.
Okay.
They actually found Catacutan guilty of two different crimes.
Two separate charges.
Yeah. Homicide, which is defined under Article 249 of the Revised Penal Code. It's like when you kill someone without a good reason, basically.
Right.
And theft, which is in Article 308 and 309 of the Revised Penal Code. But it was also changed by Republic Act number 10951. Basically, it's when you take someone's stuff illegally.
Okay, so they looked at the actions separately.
Yeah.
Instead of as one combined act.
Right. And so the punishments changed too. For the homicide, he got a sentence that could be anywhere from 8 years and 1 day of prison mayor, up to 14 years, 8 months, and 1 day of reclusion temporal.
Right.
And for the theft, he got 6 months of arresto mayor. On top of that, he had to pay civil indemnity, moral damages, and temperate damages to Alexander Tanango's family for both crimes.
It's still accountability, right?
Yeah.
But it's a different kind of accountability than what the lower courts had decided.
It really shows how much those details matter,
The intent.
The intent.
The timing.
Yeah.
It can completely change the legal outcome.
So I want to ask you, our listener, something to think about. The Supreme Court, they were really careful to separate the idea of wanting to kill from wanting to rob. Right? So how does this case like change the way you understand these complicated crimes where multiple things happen close together? And how important is it, do you think, to really figure out what the criminal's original motive was?
Yeah. And how much does that matter when it comes to justice?
What do you guys think? Leave your thoughts in the comments below.
Yeah, we want to hear from you.
If you liked this deep dive into Philippine law, give it a thumbs up. Share it with your friends.
Yeah, spread the knowledge.
Let's make sure everyone understands these important legal concepts.
I think that's so important.
Let's quickly go over the main legal ideas we talked about today. First, we had robbery with homicide.
Right. So that's a special type of crime.
Yeah, and in this case, they couldn't prove that the intent to rob was there from the start, right?
Yeah, that's why it didn't stick.
Right.
The robbery seemed to happen after the fact.
Then there's admission against interest.
Remember that.
Yeah, it's like when someone says something that could hurt them legally, so it's probably true, right?
Yeah, it's considered pretty reliable evidence.
Then there was homicide, which is basically killing someone without a good reason.
Right, a basic definition.
And theft, which is taking someone's property illegally.
And it's important to remember that the Supreme Court saw those two things, homicide and theft, as separate acts in this case,
Yeah,
not as one combined act.
that was the big difference.
Knowing those legal terms, that helps us understand the Supreme Court's thinking.
It's all about the specifics, right?
Totally.
So if you want to keep learning about, these big legal cases in the Philippines, you know what to do, right?
Hit that subscribe button.
Hit that subscribe button. We'll see you next time.